Hello, Malma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic. And as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. And now to the news. First to Japan, driving rain hampered the efforts of tens of thousands of rescue workers in southwestern Japan as they searched for survivors from the deadly floods and landslides with more torrential downpours forecast. Take a look. Around 50 people were feared dead after heavy rain lashed areas of western Japan beginning early Saturday, causing rivers to burst their banks and flood low-lying regions. Bad weather was preventing some rescue efforts, local officials said, with at least 13 people still unaccounted for. Because of the heavy rain, we were forced to cancel some emergency flights of helicopters over the disaster zone, according to Tsubasa Miyamoto, an official from the Kumamoto region. Although the rain has eased from its peak, the floods washed away roads and bridges, leaving many in isolated communities cut off. A local firefighter in the western region of Kagoshima told AFP they had deployed boats to rescue 11 people, but conditions were making it hard to reach others stranded. A local firefighter in the western region of Kagoshima said they had deployed boats to rescue 11 people, but conditions were making it hard to reach others stranded. At a nursing home for the elderly, 14 people were feared dead when water from a nearby river inundated the ground floor, leaving those in wheelchairs unable to reach higher ground. Emergency services aided by locals in rafts managed to rescue around 50 staff and residents from the facility, bringing them to safety by boat. Heavy rain is expected to continue through Tuesday afternoon, and the Japan Meteorological Agency issued a non-compulsory evacuation order for around 500,000 people in the southwestern Japan. Up to 250 millimeters or 10 inches of rain is expected in the 24-hour period through Tuesday morning in the southern part of Kyushu Island, which include areas already hit hard by the flooding, according to the agency. In other news, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian confirms that for the first time since the pandemic began, the border between Australia's two most populous states, Victoria and New South Wales, will be closed from midnight on Tuesday.
Advice this morning from Dr. Chant, and following conversations with both the Victorian Premier and the Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Morrison, that New South Wales and Victoria will be shutting down their borders from midnight tomorrow night. So today and tomorrow is the last time in which any Victorians will be allowed across the border unless they have a special permit or some exemption. We have done this based on health advice, and especially given the fact that when our nation had those higher number of cases back in February and March, the vast majority of those cases were from overseas travellers or their direct contacts. What is happening in Victoria is very different, which is why we've had to take this necessary step. We wouldn't have taken this step unless we absolutely had to. And I also stress to the other states, now that New South Wales has taken this decision, and given where we are, there's really no excuse for any other state apart from Victoria to have any border closures with New South Wales. And I urge all the other states of Australia, in our national interest, to think about that. Given this move by the New South Wales government, we now anticipate that the rest of the nation will be able to deal with each other directly without any hard border closures.
For the first time since the epidemic began, the border between Australia's two most populous states, Victoria and New South Wales, will be closed overnight Tuesday. Officials from both states have said, home to more than 6.6 million people, Victoria announced a record 127 new cases Monday as the virus spread through Melbourne, including a cluster in several densely populated apartment blocks. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews described the decision to close off the state. As the SMART called the right call at this time, given the significant challenges that they face containing the virus. Police said they will use drones and other aerial surveillance to patrol the vast border, with large fines and up to 6 months in jail for people who breach the order. Plans to reopen Victoria's border with South Australia have already been put on ice after weeks of easing virus restrictions. Melbourne has seen a huge spike in community transmission, leading health officials to effectively shut off some neighborhoods to the rest of the city until the end of July. 16 of the new cases were detected in 9 high-rise public housing towers, where 3,000 residents were locked in their homes on Saturday in Australia's strictest coronavirus response to date. So far, a total of 53 cases have been recorded in the buildings, which are home to a large number of vulnerable migrants.
And North Melbourne, taking more than 1,300 units. The hard lockdown was all.
India announced that it has nearly 700,000 coronavirus cases, taking it past Russia to become the third hardest hit nation in the global pandemic. India has registered 19,693 deaths from the virus, a much lower number than many other badly hit countries. India's major cities have been worst hit by the pandemic. New Delhi and Mumbai each have about 100,000 cases, with 3,000 dead in the capital and nearly 5,000 in Mumbai. New Delhi has opened a new 10,000-bed temporary virus hospital, while other cities are tightening restrictions on movement to head off a new surge in cases. The Kerala state capital, Thiruvananthapuram, imposed a new lockdown from Monday, with public transport shut and only pharmacies allowed to open. The clampdown came after hundreds of new cases were reported across the state, which had been praised for its action to curtail the pandemic. Thousands of the iconic jeepneys or minibuses, known in the Philippines as jeepneys, have been allowed back on the roads more than 3 months after they were forced to stop running due to the coronavirus. Take a look.
Kasi lumalabas-pasok po yung pagpasok nung lalabas lang kagad aanginin lang nung tatangin ng hangin yung mga virus na
Para sa ibang sakyan.
Sa makukulob Pag may pumasok na hindi nalalabas yung kulob na kulob.
Nakakatakot pa rin kasi hindi natin nakikita yung kalaban yung virus
Baka sa lumalabas pa rin kayo?
Wala na kami makakain Bago umakyat, lalagyan mo ng alcohol. Tapos, i-check ka yung temperature niya. Kaso lang, mayroong mga pasahirong minsan nakyat na. Hindi pa kasi nila alam na ganun pala. May mga nagbabagong mga patakaran
Okay naman kasi hindi na siya mag-aabot-abot ng bayad kasi meron naman ng kukuha ng bayad bago ka sumakay. Para less transmission ng virus din yun. Tsaka mas hindi kagaya ng dating jeep na mas siksikan, mas okay yung ngayon, mas hindi ka masyadong maiinitan.
Several thousand of jeepneys equipped with DIY seat dividers made from cellophane to help maintain social distancing are now transporting locals and laborers around the city, whose temperatures are now checked and hand sanitized upon boarding the vehicle. However, despite the easing in restrictions, the vast majority of jeepneys remain grounded. The Department of Transportation has been pushing for a cashless payment system through a quick response code, and it has given jeepney operators and drivers until Sunday to comply. The LTFRB has been reiterating that reopening public transportation, but at reduced capacity, was a gradual, calibrated, and calculated approach to fighting the coronavirus. The resumption of mass transportation was done in 2 phases. From June 1 to 21, only trains and bus augmentation, taxis, transport network, vehicle services, shuttle services, point-to-point buses to be operational at limited capacity. From June 22 to 30, public utility buses, modern public utility vehicles, and UV Express have been added and allowed to ply in general community quarantine areas while still keeping the limited passenger capacity. Meanwhile, the United States marked an unusually somber Independence Day with President Trump bashing domestic opponents in China, but praising the country's coronavirus response despite a record surge in cases.
In every age, there have always been those who seek to lie about the past in order to gain power in the present. Those that are lying about our history, those who want us to be ashamed of who we are not interested in justice or in healing. Their goal is demolition. Our goal is not to destroy the greatest structure on earth, what we have built, the United States of America. We will never allow an angry mob to tear down our statues, erase our history, indoctrinate our children, or trample on our freedoms. We will safeguard our values, traditions, customs, and beliefs. We will teach our children to cherish and adore their country so that they can build its future. We are now in the process of defeating the radical left, the Marxists, the anarchists, the agitators, the looters, and people who in many instances have absolutely no clue what they are doing. And we've made a lot of progress. Our strategy is moving along well. It goes out in one area and rears back its ugly face in another area. But we've learned a lot. We've learned how to put out the flame. We are unleashing our nation's scientific brilliance. And we'll likely have a therapeutic and/or vaccine solution long before the end of the year. The more you lie, the more you slander, the more you try to demean and divide, the more we will work hard to tell the truth, and we will win. The more you lie and demean and collude, the more credibility you lose.
He also accused China, where the outbreak originated, of a cover-up that allowed the illness to race across the globe, but he hailed American scientific brilliance. Some of the U.S. leader's sharpest words were for the media, which he accused of a campaign to smear opponents as racist. Across the country, virus fears dampened or nixed main street parades, backyard barbecues, and family reunions on a day when Americans typically celebrate their 1776 Declaration of Independence from Britain. The previous evening, President Trump spoke at Mount Rushmore, where he upended the tradition of presidents giving inspiring and unifying speeches on July 4th by lashing out at protests that have erupted since unarmed African-American George Floyd was killed by police. Facing a tough re-election battle in November and eager to mobilize his political base, President Trump denounced violent mayhem on U.S. streets. Meanwhile, U.S. Sunbelt mayors warned that their cities are at risk of being overwhelmed by a surge of coronavirus cases as they pushed back against U.S. President Trump's attempt to minimize the gravity of the spreading virus. COVID-19 has been raging for weeks across southern and western states. Florida has registered 10,000 new cases on some days. Arizona has seen record hospitalizations, and intensive care units in Houston, Texas are operating near maximum capacity. Mixed messages from U.S. leaders have been a problem, Mayor Kate Gallego of Phoenix, Arizona, told ABC this week. Once Arizona began reopening its economy, she said, "We had crowded nightclubs, handing out free champagne, and no masks." The state has now passed the 1,800 death mark, more than 6 times the toll in all of South Korea. In Texas, meanwhile, Governor Greg Abbott had prohibited restrictions such as mask wearing requirements sought by some local governments. But with the virus dramatically surging, the Republican governor on Thursday reversed himself, ordering mask wearing in most counties. The hardest hit Sunbelt states were among the first to reopen their economies, strongly encouraged to do so by President Trump. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced an easing of quarantine for visitors from certain countries. Joining us live from the United Kingdom is Aribel Celestino. Hello, Aribel.
Hi, Alma. And yes, here's our update from the UK. Updates with list of countries published, airlines withdrawing challenge. Travelers from more than 70 low-risk countries and territories will no longer have to self-isolate when arriving in England. The UK government said Friday in a major easing of its coronavirus quarantine scheme. The list of exemptions mostly covers Europe, but not Portugal, and the Caribbean, Australia, and New Zealand, although the United States and mainland China are notably omitted. The changes, which will take place on July 10, represent a significant lifting of the mandatory 14-day self-quarantine imposed 1 month ago to stop new infections from abroad. Britain has suffered Europe's deadliest outbreak of COVID-19, with 44,000 deaths among confirmed cases, but is now slowly coming out of lockdown. Today marks the next step in carefully reopening our great nation, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said. Airlines, who had warned the quarantine would damage an industry already on its knees due to global coronavirus shutdowns, welcomed the easing, and the three of them dropped a legal challenge. But exemptions will only apply to arrivals into England, with Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland so far sticking to the blanket ban. UK ministers had suggested the delay in announcing the list. It had been due to earlier in week, due to a lack of cooperation from the devolved government in Scotland. But Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon denied this and blasted Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government in London for a shambolic effort. She said the list her government was shown on Thursday had changed by Friday, by adding that Edinburgh would likely publish its own list in the coming days. Regarding the airline withdrawal challenge, a traffic light system, red, amber, and green, would be used for different countries depending on the prevalence of the coronavirus, Shapps said. Travelers from the green and amber countries will no longer have to self-isolate on arrival. The amber countries will have reciprocal arrangements in place with England, while the green countries are deemed to be safer than England, such as New Zealand. The amber countries include France, Italy, and Spain, which are the most popular summer holidays destinations for British people. However, Portugal is excluded. The United States will be designated with a red light, requiring mandatory self-quarantine because they have got very high numbers of infections, Shapps said. British Airways, EasyJet, and Ryanair had taken legal action over the scheme they said would have a severe impact on the travel and tourism industry, which was already running on fumes. But their lawyer told the High Court of England and Wales in London on Friday that they had now agreed to withdraw the claim. In a statement, budget airline EasyJet said the list of exemptions was an important move in the reopening of aviation to support the wider UK recovery. Patricia Yates, director of tourism body Visit Britain, said allowing easier entry for overseas visitors would provide a timely boost. Alma?
All right, so Aribel, Yes. Are there any latest advice on for holiday makers who might be displaying symptoms before they depart?
Holiday makers will be bearing all the risk when overseas getaways return, as they face little chance of refunds if they go into self-isolation. Anyone who gets coronavirus symptoms at the time that they are booked to go away is highly unlikely to get their money back when they cancel their holiday. Package holidays, firms, and travel insurance will probably not pay out. Alex Neil of Resolution Service Resolver said UK tourists need to be aware they were taking a risk. It is likely that the new travel insurance policies won't cover you if you develop symptoms before going on holiday. And if the flight or package holiday isn't canceled, then you have no automatic right to compensation, she said. While it's important to the economy to support the travel industry, at this time, it's the customer who is bearing all of the risk. Alma?
So what are the, again, can you run that through me again? What are the countries exempted from quarantine for travelers arriving there?
Well, the list focuses on countries in Europe, island nations around the world, including the Caribbean, and countries further east, including Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, Australia, and New Zealand. The 14 British overseas territories are also exempt. More countries may be added over the coming days, the Department for Transport says. And the government has been advising against all but essential travel since March. But this advice has been lifted for destinations that no longer pose an unacceptably high risk for British travelers. Over to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Sharibel, for your updates there in the United Kingdom. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much for having me. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Aribel Celestino, and we live in interesting times.
Over in Spain, Catalonia has again locked down 200,000 people over a new surge of an outbreak. Joining us live from Spain is Beverly Madrid. Hello, Beverly.
Hello, Alma. How are you?
I'm good. So another lockdown in Catalonia.
Yes. Spain's northeastern Catalonia region on Saturday locked down an area with around 200,000 residents following a surge in cases of the new coronavirus. Catalonia's region president Quim Torra told reporters there had been a sharp rise in infections in Segria, a zone that includes the town of Lleida, some 150 kilometers west of Barcelona. People would not be allowed to enter or leave the area. Gatherings of more than 10 people will be banned, and visits to retirement homes halted, officials said. The restrictions do not apply to seasonal harvest workers, and movement is not restricted within the zone, however. The move came as the summer holidays started in Spain, and the country began readmitting visitors from 12 countries outside the European Union 2 weeks after allowing people from the EU's visa-free Schengen zone and Britain to return. It is a surprise, said Josep Alui, a 63-year-old retiree who returned to the area from a second home as a precaution. It's another step backwards. It's not good. Spain has been one of the countries worst hit by the coronavirus pandemic, with at least 28,385 deaths, Europe's fourth highest toll after Britain, Italy, and France. Madrid imposed one of the world's strictest lockdowns to stop the spread of the virus and only recently began to open up. Barcelona celebrated another milestone in its bid to reopen on Saturday, with visitors allowed back into the Sagrada Familia, an imposing modernist basilica that is among Spain's most visited buildings. In the first phase of its reopening, health workers were the first to be admitted as a tribute to their work battling the pandemic. Matilde Fuentes, a 49-year-old doctor, was particularly touched. We went through very difficult times. We tried to be there whenever we were needed. And now that they thank us, it gives me goosebumps. Speaking during a trip Saturday to Galicia, in the country's northwest, the first region to exit the lockdown last month, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez warned, do not let your guard down, but do not let yourself be overcome by fear. We must take to the streets, take advantage of the new normality, revive the economy, the socialist leader said, adding that the state is better prepared to fight against the resurgence of the pandemic. On Friday, Spain registered 17 virus deaths within 24 hours, its highest daily toll since June 19. There have been more than 50 reported outbreaks throughout nearly all the country's regions. The total number of cases now stands at 250,000 and 545 in the country of 47 million. Lerida province, which includes the Segria area, has recorded just over 4,000 cases, including 60 on Friday. Back to you, Anna.
All right. Thank you very much, Beverly, for your time and for that report. Thank you, EBC Spain Bureau.
Thank you. I'm reporting here from Barcelona, Spain. I'm Beverly Madrid and believe in interesting time.
Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino,
Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike declared victory in Sunday's vote to elect the leader of one of the world's most populous cities and immediately vowed to step up the fight against a recent coronavirus resurgence. Governor Koike gave an online victory speech in front of a limited number of journalists to minimize the risk of coronavirus infection. Take a look.
喫緊の課題でございますのは何よりも、コロナ対策、新型コロナウイルス対策で、ございます。この本日も4日連続で100の3桁の数字を陽性者を出しております。まずはやはりここもコロナウイルス感染症対策、これが最優先の課題となってまいります。いかにして、安全安心な大会が開けるか、コロナ対策もそうであります。それからいかにですね、費用を圧縮しながら、簡素化していくかということ、これも都民の皆様や国民の皆様方の納得が いただけるような形で今後進めていく必要がございます。
The 67-year-old media-savvy Koike is a rare top female leader in Japan's male-dominated politics and is often mentioned as a possible prime minister. Many observers say her smooth performance during the coronavirus pandemic contrasted sharply with current Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who critics say bungled Japan's response. The postponed Olympics, due to open on July 23, 2021, was also a major theme of the campaign, and Koike pledged to reduce the Games budget as organizers grapple with the unprecedented challenge of rescheduling the event. The world must stand in solidarity with Hong Kongers after Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law on the semi-autonomous city. That is according to activist Joshua Wong, vowing to continue campaigning for democracy. Wong, one of the city's most prominent young activists, was speaking outside a court where he and fellow campaigners were being prosecuted for involvement in civil unrest, which rocked Hong Kong last year.
With the risk of our personal safety, with the threat of life sentencing, we might be worried and also being targeted by Beijing. But we also encourage the global community to let our voice be heard in the world. Once we still have any possibility, we still hope to let the world to know that now is the time to stand with Hong Kong, and now is the time for Hong Kongers keep our momentum. Even they ban my book in public library, they can't ignore and silence the voice of Hong Kong people. With the belief of Hong Kong people to fight for freedom, we will never give up and surrender to Beijing. It's never optimistic under the hardline crackdown of Beijing, but no matter 100,000 people took to the street when Hong Kong government banned the protest on June 4th and July 1st. We have no hope towards the government, but we have hope towards people, no matter they are in Hong Kong or out of Hong Kong. So, on the upcoming weekend, is the primary election of pro-democratic camp. I wish more than 100,000 Hong Kongers can come out to vote. The primary election is not a matter of the quality of candidates or the detail of policy platform. It's about how we could have the mandate from people to show we discontent to Beijing.
China enacted the security law for the restless city last week, banning acts of subversion, secession, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. The law has sent a wave of fear through Hong Kong and criminalized certain opinions such as calls for independence or autonomy. At his court appearance on Tuesday, Wong, 23, remained unbowed. Wong, who began campaigning for democracy when he was just 12, is often vilified by China's state media as a black hand, conspiring with foreign forces to undermine the nation. Beijing has been incensed by Wong and others meeting Western politicians and supporting sanctions in response to China's tightening control over the city. The new security law specifically outlaws lobbying for sanctions. Wong steered clear of any mention of sanctions in his remarks on Monday, but instead sticking to more general comments. The national security law imposed on Tuesday is the most radical shift in Hong Kong, in how Hong Kong is run since it was handed back to China by Britain in 1997. Under the handover deal, Beijing promised Hong Kong could keep key civil liberties as well as judicial and legislative autonomy for 50 years. The new law has changed that landscape. It empowers China's security agents to operate openly in the city, toppling the legal firewall that has existed between the mainland's party-controlled courts and Hong Kong's independent judiciary. Beijing has also said it will have jurisdiction over especially serious prosecutions. In a press conference conducted over an online video call, Chinese ambassador to the United Kingdom, Liu Xiaoming, warned Britain that its move to grant additional migration rights to British overseas nationals based in Hong Kong in response to China's new national security law constitutes a gross interference in China's internal affairs. Let's listen in.
The UK government keeps making irresponsible remarks on Hong Kong affairs through its so-called 6-monthly report on Hong Kong, make unwarranted accusations against the national security law for Hong Kong SAR, and even talks about changing the arrangements for British national overseas passport holders in Hong Kong. These moves constitute a gross interference in China's internal affairs and openly trample on the basic norms governing international relations. So we want to be your friend. We want to be your partner. But if you want to make China a hostile country, you have to bear the consequences.
Speaking in Parliament earlier, UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said Britain had a duty of care to residents of a colony it handed back to China in 1997. He also said the country would allow anyone with British national overseas status and their dependents to come to the United Kingdom and eventually receive citizenship. That's estimated to be more than 3 million Hong Kongers. Hong Kong was under UK jurisdiction until it was handed over to China in 1997 with a guarantee that Beijing would preserve the city's judicial and legislative autonomy for 50 years. The Chinese embassy in London stressed that all Chinese compatriots residing in Hong Kong are Chinese nationals, and the British plan covers almost 3 million Hong Kongers who either have a British national overseas passports or are eligible to apply for one. The embassy said these people were Chinese nationals as well. Beijing has never publicly raised the possibility of offering Britons either Chinese citizenship or broader residence rights. Meanwhile, China issued a travel warning for Canada on Monday and said bilateral relations could deteriorate further over Ottawa's response to a controversial national security law in Hong Kong. Canada last week suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong and halted exports of sensitive military gear to the financial hub as Western nations voiced concern about the legislation's impact on the city's special rights. China strongly condemns this and reserves the right to make further response. All consequences arising therefrom will be borne by Canada, according to Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian at a regular press briefing. The Chinese embassy in Ottawa separately issued a travel warning urging its citizens to remain cautious because of frequent violent actions by law enforcement agencies in Canada, which have triggered many demonstrations. Canada updated its travel advisory for Hong Kong so Canadians will know how the law might affect them. Relations between Beijing and Ottawa have worsened since Canadian authorities arrested top Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou in December 2018 and China later detained 2 Canadians, including a former diplomat. Ennio Morricone, one of the world's best-known and most prolific film composers, died in Rome on Monday. Morricone, who was 91, died in hospital where he was being treated for a fractured femur following a fall, media reports said, quoting a statement from a lawyer. He composed the music for about 500 films, including his old school friend Sergio Leone's 1966 spaghetti western The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, for which he won an Oscar in 2016. Italian Health Minister Roberto Speranza wrote in a tweet, "Adieu, maestro, and thank you for the emotions you gave us." Before winning the Oscar for Best Film Score in 2016, the Rome-born son of a trumpeter had been nominated no fewer than 5 times before the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, embarrassed that such a talent had not been recognized sooner, presented him with a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2007. Morricone's previous nominations were for Days of Heaven, 1978, The Mission, 1986, The Untouchables, 1987, Bugsy, 1991, and Malena, 2000. Although he's most closely associated in the public mind with Leone's Western starring Clint Eastwood, Morricone's composition for Roland Joff's Jesuit drama, The Mission, is considered by many critics to be his cinematic masterpiece, an epic and eclectic reflection of South America's musical melting pot. In other news, Queensland students enjoyed the break during the school holidays. Alisa Ventura reports from Australia.
Around this time of the year, students here in Queensland, Australia, has concluded their second term of schooling with a 2-week school break. However, due to current COVID-19 restrictions implemented, their school holiday plans might be changed in more ways than one. As of 12 noon of June 1, 2020, the Queensland Government has proceeded with the Stage 2 easing of restrictions. To name a few, these current restrictions are unlimited travelling in overnight stays anywhere within the Queensland state borders, gatherings of up to 20 people for events with compliance to social distancing, and reopening of business such as restaurants, cafes, beauty salons, gyms, and more. Public health measures such as social distancing of 1.5 meters, hand hygiene, and staying at home when not feeling well are still ongoing, ensuring the community's health and safety. Nonetheless, students and their families might be subjected to alter their holiday plans to accommodate and comply to the current restrictions. Furthermore, due to the Stage 2 easing of restrictions, businesses have reopened, allowing more employees, especially parents, to return to their jobs. With the ongoing school term holidays, majority of students are at home for the weeks to pass. Parents of students will have to accommodate the situation to maintain balance in their work and home life. The emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic has created a great impact within the society. The restrictions implemented to keep the community safe has influenced the way Queenslanders will spend their school holidays. On the 3rd of July 2020 at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the Queensland Government will be easing the current restrictions just in time for the final week before the next semester of the school year starts within the state. From Townsville, Queensland, Australia, Alyssa Ventura, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Eagle News will be right back.
Hello, my name is Robin and I'm 5 years old.
Welcome back. BSP or Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Benjamin Diokno said the country's latest economic downturn is inevitable due to the pandemic. The local economy contracted by 0.2% in the first quarter of 2020 and is expected to further shrink in the second quarter. However, he pressed for the further opening up of the economy while observing health protocols. Take a look.
Consumers holding back on their consumption. With household consumption and balance sheets of firms adversely affected.
C'est une occasion de visiter le Louvre autrement, avec moins de monde.
Bulk of consumers holding back on their consumption. With household consumption and balance sheets of firms adversely affected, alongside greater precautionary behavior amid continued uncertainty and fear of contagion. This will further dent consumption and investment, bulk of consumers holding back on their consumption. With household consumption and balance sheets of firms adversely affected, alongside greater precautionary behavior amid continued uncertainty and fear of contagion. This will further dent consumption and investment and ultimately economic growth. However, we need to carefully balance the objective of restarting the economy as soon as possible, while at the same time ensuring that minimum health standards remain in place to prevent subsequent waves of infection from occurring. Next slide, please. For its part, the BSP is prepared to use the full range of its monetary instruments and to deploy monetary policy and regulatory relief measures as needed in fulfillment of its price and financial stability objectives. Thus far, the inflation outlook remains benign from 2020 to 2022. For the next 3 years, inflation would be within the 2 to 4% target band. Next slide, please. We note that while the responses of individual governments around the world have been primarily responsible for addressing the pandemic, we're also aware how this challenging period needs international cooperation. In this regard, we have seen the international community step up by helping their member and non-member economies cope with the economic impact. Next slide, please. Summing up, the Philippine macroeconomic fundamentals were strong going into the pandemic with higher monetary and fiscal space compared to other countries. The BSP did its part by proactively easing monetary policy and launching several liquidity-enhancing measures, complementing fiscal response from the national government. To address weaknesses of aggregate demand and mitigate further economic contraction, there is a need for substantial targeted economic policies with fiscal policy at the front line and the monetary policy playing a supporting role.
The growth target has been changed by the Interagency Development Budget Coordination Committee to a contraction of between 2% to 3.4% as a result of the pandemic. This after GDP contracted by 0.2% in the first 3 months of the first year of the year, the first negative growth after the last quarter of 1998, ending the expansion in the last 84 quarters. The OCNU said second quarter growth will be a deeper contraction, but said that the macroeconomic fundamentals remain strong and economic policies to address the impact of the pandemic are targeted. The Louvre, the world's most visited museum, reopened after its coronavirus closure on Monday, but with nearly a third of its galleries still shut. Take a look.
En revanche, donc pour ceux qui pourront venir, donc les visiteurs japonais par exemple, donc, mais aussi les visiteurs européens ou les visiteurs français, c'est une occasion de visiter le Louvre autrement, avec moins de monde. D'habitude, nous accueillons plus de 30 000 visiteurs par jour, autour de 40 000 l'été. Et là, nous avons limité la fréquentation à 7 400 visiteurs par exemple aujourd'hui. Donc avec des créneaux horaires qui permettent en effet donc de lisser la fréquentation. Vous voyez, les gens ne font pas la pluie. On a organisé aussi un parcours particulier. Donc la réservation est obligatoire, le port du masque est obligatoire à partir de 11 ans. Mais à l'intérieur, on a fait en sorte aussi, parce que le musée est très grand, que le visiteur ne croise pas d'autres visiteurs. Donc en mettant les salles dans un certain sens de visite, avec une entrée et une sortie. Voilà. Le musée est très très grand, c'est l'occasion de... On a aussi préparé une programmation culturelle particulière pour ces retrouvailles, pour fêter ces retrouvailles. C'est une exposition qui s'appelle Figures d'artistes. On a rassemblé le meilleur des collections du Louvre, notamment la magnifique collection d'autoportraits, des grands artistes qui font le Louvre, Rembrandt, Poussin, Delacroix. Et puis c'est aussi donc des mini-découvertes, des visites toutes les heures, donc des présentations dans 8 points du musée. Alors la salle de la Joconde, comme vous le savez, c'est la salle la plus visitée du musée, donc un dispositif particulier avec au sol marqué des espacements pour que les gens justement respectent cette distance entre les visiteurs, et puis donc une queue, c'est certes un peu contraignant, avec la garantie d'accéder tout près de la Joconde. Hein. Donc l'idée c'est d'arrêter, d'empêcher les gens de s'accumuler, de s'écraser près du tableau, mais de le faire de manière ordonnée pour avoir ce moment d'éternité, seul à seul, vis-à-vis de la Joconde. Donc c'est possible.
Yes, because I decided to come for the weekend. I saw that the Louvre was opening only on Monday, so I decided to extend it for a day. So it's a bit of luck, but also a bit of decision.
And when did the vast former palace of Francis Kings has lost more than 40 million euros in ticket sales during the near 4-month lockdown, and director Jean-Luc Martinez admitted it could have a few more lean years ahead as the world adapts to the virus. Although most of the museum's most popular draws, like the Mona Lisa and its vast antiquities collection, will be accessible, other galleries where social distancing is more difficult will remain closed. Nor will there be any crowding in front of Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece for a selfie, with visitors warned that they will have to stick to standing on well-distanced spots marked on the floor. To avoid bottlenecks, the museum said arrows will guide visitors through the labyrinth of galleries with doubling back band. The museum hopes to attract more French visitors to fill the gap as it embarks on a campaign to shake off its elitist image before the Paris Olympics in 4 years' time. Director Jean-Luc Martinez, who comes from a working-class background, said he wanted to build on the outreach success of the Louvre's Outpost Museum in Lens, a poor former mining town in northern France. He also said sometimes the Louvre can intimidate certain demographics, and the museum needs to reassure people that its collections are also for them, with improved presentation, labeling, and curation. Dozens of bodies are buried in a mass grave after Myanmar's worst landslide in living memory killed at least 174 jade miners in northern Kachin State. Take a look. All right, before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night, I'm Alma Angeles. And tonight, we leave you with some pictures. Before we go, we leave you with some images of the fireworks during the celebrations in the U.S. Take a look.
Start of it in old New York, and if I can make it there, I'm gonna make it anywhere. It's up to